Aloha kakahiaka kako. This is the perspectives of a backyard mahi ʻai session presented by Kaʻiana Runnels. My name is Luanapu'u Ovao Luanapu'u, and I will be the facilitator for today. And we're going to have Moani, who is our moderator, introduce herself.
Aloha Ovao Moani Furuta. I'm going to be your moderator today. Please know that this session is being recorded and will be shared with others for educational uses only. Mahalo and enjoy your session.
Before we get started with Kaʻiana, we just have a few housekeeping announcements, which I'm sure most of you are ma'a to already. Please keep your mic muted during the presentation so we can avoid any background noises as this session is being recorded. Feel free to use the chat box for comments or questions, and we will try to address them as time allows at the end of the session. If you log off, just come back in. We will be turning off the waiting room so that people can come in automatically. And at the very end of the session, if you want a certificate of attendance, please make sure that your screen name is correct on your Zoom little sign in. You will be getting that through the summit survey at the end of the day or so. We have a jam-packed session today, and I want to make sure that we give Kaʻiana as much time as possible. So we're just going to get started. I had the pleasure of attending and facilitating his session at last year's conference, and I learned so much. So I'm really, really looking forward to this session and learning so much more. We just want to mahalo Kaʻiana for coming, and I'm going to turn the floor over to you. You want to share ho'olauna ia'oiho and share a little bit about your practice?
Mahalo. Ua Kaʻiana Runnels, ano e ke aloha. Noho au ma laupohoihoi ka hupa a ki halani. I am a makua kane. I have 4 kamali'i. My hiapo is 9, Ava, and my muli is, he just turned 5. And we mahi ʻai as a family. So I mahi ʻai for the Kohala Center as well. I manage a 11-acre ma'ala mahina ʻai in Honoka'a in the ahupa of Namoku. And I also mahi ʻai at my hale in Laupohoihoi. So yeah, that's the gist of, I mean, we do a lot of other fun stuff too, but the bulk of what we do is we cultivate food.
So Kaʻiana, can you just share a little bit, like how did you get started, or how did you become interested in mahi ʻai?
Mahalo. Yeah, it started at a really young age. I was 8 years old when I'm not sure who brought it home. Someone brought home some kalo. And I remember looking at it and I saw that the little makas on the kalo looked like they would grow. And so I got a knife, a sharp steak knife, and I cut out the makas and I threw them in a paper towel with some water. And they took root. And from there, I asked my grandpa to build me a backyard, like a raised bed. And we filled it with no problem. And then the next generation, I asked him if he could chip up. We had a concrete slab in the backyard we used for barbecues and stuff. I said, hey, can we get rid of that and plant a ma'ala? And my grandpa was very supportive. And so he hired a crew. They chipped up the concrete. We healed the soil. And then we planted back there. I remember all kinds of plants going in the ground and how beautiful it was. So to me, that's where it all started. And who I learned from, as far as mea kanu Hawaii goes, is a lot of it came from a small handful of Kūpuna. I mean, and I also believe that mahi ʻai is in our koko. We all descend from the original mahi ʻai, Ho'ohoku Kalani, who planted the first kalo, right, Ha'aloa, and watered it with her tears. And so I believe that we all have it in us. We just have to tap back into it. But I've learned from these earthly, amazing Kūpuna as well. And some of my first experiences of getting real deep with haloa, with Maiʻa, with ʻUala, with ko, came through these Kūpuna named Kamoe and Kamoe Wak and Kavika Escaron. And after them, I transitioned over to Moko Keawe. That was on Oahu in Maui. And on Moko Keawe, even before I came here, I became really close friends with Uncle Jerry Konanui. And when we came here, the learning increased exponentially, and he was able to share so much of his ike with me. And so all of the ike I share today, and in future classes, if you choose to take it, we will go through things in future classes like traditional planting methods, kalo variety identification, alpha variety identification, uses, plant uses, la'au, mo'olelo. That won't be in this session per se, but all of that knowledge doesn't belong to me. It was given to me temporarily to share with all of you and with others. And after today, it will be your kuleana, and after this, please papa to pass it on to others as well. None of this is mine. So yeah, that's a little bit about how I started and some of the kupuna. There's lots of other kupuna that haven't been mentioned, but kupuna like Penny Levin, my hoa. I have older brothers in this realm of haloa that were the other sons or students of Uncle Jerry, like Kaipoi Kelling, Duffy Chang, Lono Logan, Anthony DeLuz. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And Nick Francisco, who's part of organizing this conference. Uncle Jerry's literal mo'opuna, Hayden Konanui, is in here too. He's also a kumu, a source of knowledge. So yeah, just want to acknowledge that there's many names and that's just a glimpse of some of the ike that I'm able to experience.
To be a running theme. From this morning, we heard a lot about ohana or the kumu that passed on ike, and I know you shared a little bit about yours, your kumu or mahi ʻai that have inspired you, including your first experiences with your own kupuna. Just wondering, how do you plan to share this with your own ohana? You mentioned you have your 4 keiki. What part does mahi ʻai play in your ohana time with them?
Yeah, mahalo. My ohana, mahi ʻai isn't just something we do on the weekends, right? We don't have these jobs where we work in an office and then we go to the mall on the weekend. It's every part of our life. We wake up in the morning, and the first thing we do is we go outside and we kilo. As the sun is rising, we look at what the weather of that day will be, and that will determine our hana, coupled with the moon phase that determines our hana. So our ohana, we homeschool our kamali'i, and so all of our education is based around aina. And all of our readings are about things in the aina, or holoholona, our animals on the aina. And I mean, something as complex as math, right? Where we can figure out how many rows of kalo this way by how many rows of kalo this way, and you got your perimeter and area to readings, right? Mo'olelo. It's all within aina. And so, and then my actual job is also on aina and educating others on aina. So it is a family affair. We with regards to kalo, we huki kalo as a family. We kanu kalo as a family. We ku'i. Well, I used to be the main ku'i person in our family, but luckily my kids are old enough now where they can ku'i with no pu'us, and that's such a blessing because now they can fill the umeke, and I don't have to, even break a sweat. So it's been kind of a beautiful thing to experience. But yeah, everything around ʻai, around aina, is mahi ʻai, is ohana related, and honestly, I couldn't do it without them, at least to the scale that we're doing it on. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned kilo, right? Getting up every morning. These seem like practices that you've had to develop over time. If somebody in our audience has just joined, know nothing about mahi ʻai, what kind of advice might you give them, or would you give them about starting to learn about this, about being a mahi ʻai?
Good question. My recommendation is start small. It starts with, you know, one kalo at a time. Kilo that kalo to every detail. Learn all 40 plus descriptors of that kalo. Learn what the lau looks like. Learn what every stripe and every streak and every speck. Look inside the ha, the webbing. Look at the ʻo color. Take it all the way to the end. Cook it. Ku'i it. Ferment it. Get used to that flavor. Learn everything about it. Learn what the color looks like in the morning with all the dew on top of it. Learn what it loves, what it doesn't like. Learn to pay attention. Yeah, is it throwing pua? What is it trying to tell you? Is the lau, does the lau have markings on it that is trying to tell you something? Talk to your kalo. People say, you know, a lot of my kupunas say, I love being in the mala because, you know, my kalo, they don't talk back. And I disagree. I think kalo do talk back. Just not the way humans do, which is kind of a blessing because I can spend a lot more time with kalo than I can with humans sometimes. But yeah, I would say start small with your kilo, right? Morning, sunrises and sunsets. Start looking at the weather and attaching them to certain things. Take notes. Say, oh, the sky looked like this today. And this happened at 12 o'clock, right? The heavy rains came when I saw those big black aupua in the sky. Or start associating things. If that multi-generational knowledge isn't there where you are, start taking your own notes and being that multi-generational observer and pass it on to your kamali'i, your kids as well.
Hello. I feel like I'm learning so much already. We're not even 10 minutes into this. Mahalo. It almost sounded when you were talking about it like it's and you did mention too that it's easier to be outside with your kalo than it is with people sometimes. How would you say this practice of being a mahi ʻai has affected your well-being and your health?
Yeah, so a lot actually. There's multiple levels of health, right? There's like the spiritual level of health, which to me is the most important as a Kanaka, as a Hawaiian. And so on the spiritual realm of health, it's really helped me to connect to my Kūpuna more. When you touch these Huli, when you touch these Kūpuna varieties of coal, of ʻUala, of Maiʻa, they are because in Hawaii, a lot of our kanu crops, we clone them, right? We're taking cuttings and we're replanting them. They're the literal descendants of the same planting materials, the same varieties our Kūpuna created and site adapted for areas. And their hands touch the ones right before that. And so to me, it's such a cherished gift and it's something that I honor. You know, you talk about these legacy items in a household, right? Like some people still have the pohaku from their great-great-grandfather, right? Or the papakuʻiʻai of their second great-grandfather as well, or grandmother. And so these family heirlooms that get passed down are mea kanu are the same way. These plants are the same thing. And we should honor and cherish them the same way. So there's that spiritual connection that improves health. Working and taking care of our older brother Haloa improves my spiritual health. Knowing who I come from improves my spiritual health. Then there's the mental side of it, right? Being able to be in the mala is the best form of meditation. It's where the deepest pondering occurs. It's where the purest revelation occurs as far as learning new things. It's where the plant can reveal itself. It's where the aina can reveal itself to you. So, you know, I guess in that sense, mental and spiritual are connected. There's the emotional health there too. And then the physical health is obvious, right? Eating food from our aina and our ahupua'a is the most important thing we could be doing. I feel like when it comes down to the kinds of foods we are used to consuming in this modern world, our palates are used to a very sugary type of food and a very salty and particular kind of food. But the more and more you eat pure foods from your aina, your palate starts to change and you start to appreciate the flavor that this aina can provide. And so, yeah, it boosts your overall health as well because our bodies digest these foods really efficiently.
You know, thankfully we're coming out of the tail end of this pandemic. Things are opening up a little more, but I know as we earlier, I'd say maybe a year ago, there was a lot of talk about right, shipping supply lines and getting things here. And you mentioned like, right, those sugary processed foods are coming into Hawaii. How would you say your practice of mahi ʻai kind of is a part of, I guess, that whole cycle of food, right? We talked about getting back to eating good, healthy foods from our aina. How can mahi ʻai contribute to, I guess, those issues of food security?
Yeah, mahalo. Good question. So, to me, pandemic or not, there's gonna come a time where that ship stops coming across the moana, the ocean, and I watch them. I sit at my window every day. In the morning, I see the ships coming in, and in the afternoon, I see them leaving. And what's interesting to me is I've seen less and less containers on each barge as of recent, and that's kind of evident on the food shelves. And so, regardless of the pandemic, I think that food security has always been and will always be an issue here in Hawaii. Ever since we got off of the ahupua'a system where we were fully self-sustainable. So what I see is, I see the champions of backyard gardening. They will be the ones to save Hawaii. I really believe that. I believe that, I mean, whether you live in a concrete building, in Honolulu, where they stack humans on top of each other in these concrete boxes, or if you're on Mokokiawe here and you have, 30 acres of land, 50 acres of land, I believe that however big or however small you can contribute to the food system, that's going to save Hawaii, right? If you're growing one kalo plant in a bucket on your balcony, that's a lot of poi you can get out of that one kalo plant. By the time you ku'i it, right, you're going to stretch it with vai, you're going to fill that umeke with no problem with one kalo. And so to me, I think this was a good reminder that we need to be growing our own food. And not only growing our own food, but educating ourselves on where we can find food. When the crisis happens, go to your avava, go to your valleys, and look at the abundance that is there, right? Not just the obvious fruits like the avocados and the Maiʻa, the bananas and the ulu that exist there, but look at what you can eat that, start learning what you can eat that isn't common, right? These famine foods that our Kūpuna talked about. Yeah, where are your groves of ape? Yeah. Do you know how to prepare the inside of the hapu'u starch? Do you know how to eat the la'i, the ki, the root, the pu, the starch in that root? Well, these things that exist everywhere. Do you know how to eat them? And not only do you know how to eat them, but are you eating them already so that, when the time comes, you're not feeling sick because you're eating these things that will shock your body, even though they're ono and good for your body. So, as big or as small as we can start, we have to start,
Hello. I see you've brought some mea kana with you to share today. I'm hoping it's okay if we just turn it over to you. I know you have some videos and some demos that you're going to share with us. So I'll turn it over to you to start the next section.
Yeah, mahalo. So I brought some simple plants that will help you increase your food security at your hale or on your aina, but that are also just really easy to grow. To me, like to start, when I start haumana off with plants, I want to have them be successful. And so these are just a few plants that I know that everyone can be successful with. I'll show you some simple ways that I like to prepare and plant them. But just know that right? So you're not going to find all of the knowledge right here in this meeting, or even just with me and my kumu and my Kūpuna. So this is just one way you guys could do some of these things and be successful in growing food. The 4 plants we're going to cover today, and we'll dive deeper in the next session, will be Kalo, Ko, ʻUala, and Maiʻa. And what I want you to know is that it has become a little more complicated to grow these things in our Kūpuna than our Kūpuna experience because of introduced invasive plant species and pest species. But even if you live in places where there's 10 feet of nice beautiful topsoil in Hamakua, Or if you live in, I saw some people over in ʻUala joining the chat, where there's just pahoihoi, or whether you live in Kona, where it's dry heat, or whether you live on Oahu. I saw some people from Waimanalo, where there's a lot of pa'akai in the lepo. And I was just watching some people come up on the chat from Maui. No matter where you live, you can grow these foods, and you can grow them with relative ease if you just do some of the simple practices that you'll see in these videos, but also that you'll get at a future date in our future workshops. And so, yeah, we'll start with these videos. And as we watch these videos, if you have questions arise, let's save them for the end, and then we can top story about some of the things that you were most on for. And these are just little bits and pieces of, Uncle Jared called it palu. We're just throwing a little bit of bait out there for you to bite on. And as you bite, we can dive a little bit deeper with some of the Q&A portion of this conference. And so, yeah, but right now we're just snorkeling. So yeah, we'll send the video. So this plant is called ko in Hawaii. It's known as sugarcane. And for ko, it's a super simple plant to plant, and it's great because you can grow it if you have 5 feet of topsoil, and you can grow it if you have no topsoil on a little pile of mulch. What's great about ko is you can use it to build soil as well. You can use it to break up compaction in your earth. You can use it to fix nitrogen in your soil. But most of all, it's ono for eating. It's a great snack, and I want to show you how we replant ko. So this poo of ko is not as mature as we would typically like it, but I love this variety, and I wanted to expose this variety to you all. This variety is called Wahiapele. Now, honua ʻula, another variety of ko, is often confused with Wahiapele, but Wahiapele has just a little bit of purple on the tips, whereas honua ʻula, the whole plant is purple. And so Wahiapele, the smoke of pele, has that little smoke on the leaves. When you're ready to grab your cutting from the ko, you can use something simple like a hand sickle. I like to use this pull saw. You can use loppers, machete. You can even just lean it down and snap it off. But making a clean cut seems to work best because it doesn't damage the clump underneath, the poo. And all you're gonna do is just take that cutting, and be careful because there's a lot of these fiberglass looking hairs here. You don't want to grab that with your hands. So I just grab higher and I pull down. Pull off a few of the leaves that are older. And what you're gonna do is take this tip right here. I'd say just a pia, a shaka up, and just come with your sickle or whatever you have and cut it off right there. That looks like a good few cuttings. To me, my favorite planting material is the top. And so this will be your best planting material because it has the most life in it. Usually what we do is we eat the bottom portion and we replant the top. The bottom has the most concentration of sugar. That's why we tie up our sugarcane clumps, is to make sure the sugar condenses at the bottom and they don't lie down and the sugar doesn't spread throughout the stalk. So this is for kanaka to eat. This is for replanting, and I'll show you guys how to replant it.
Kaʻiana, could you, in desperation, if you didn't have much to plant, could you plant the bottom as well?
Yeah, so if you wanted to spread this variety, you didn't have much of it, absolutely, this will all grow. There's makas, these little islets on every node. Some makas are on, exactly parallel on the other side. Some are at more of an angle and come right down the stem. So yeah, as long as these makas are present, it will grow. So when you go to kanu or plant your ko, you can do it in a few ways, but the way that I've seen the most success with is definitely not vertical like your tea leaf, right? Your key. Definitely not at an angle. I mean, it will get one or two that germinate. Even though we've read in books in the past that that's a method that they've done traditionally, I prefer to plant it horizontal, lying flat. I've noticed that almost every single maka, every single one of these buds germinates when you plant it perfectly flat. So you don't have to go very deep. If you live in a place with no soil, no problem. You can just throw it under a tree or on the pahoihoi lava, and all you gotta do is throw a little bit of mulch on it. But because I have soil, I'm gonna just go a little bit in and plant it just like that. Yeah. Same with if you were to use the top, which I do prefer because it's like it has its own mulch already tied in. All the microbes on these leaves that this plant needs to germinate are already there in the sheath. So if I do that, I just make a little ramp and then I leave the tip out and I plant this back part. And what you'll notice is that it'll sprout up here and this will curve up and also grow. A really vigorous plant. And if you were to plant this bottom of the stalk, same concept, right? You would just lie it flat like that. And honestly, you could throw it there, just throw some mulch on it and you'd be good. What I like to do is use the same leaves that you cut off from the coal earlier as mulch on top of it. Because, again, those same microbes exist in the plant that will help it germinate and grow. That's how you plant coal.
So, Kaʻiana, the makas on the stalk on the bottom portion, if you were going to be planting that, when you lay it in the trench, do you want those to be sideways or up and down? Good question. I don't think it matters a ton. Personally, I lay them sideways so that every single one has a chance to germinate. Rather, if you were to put it this way, only these ones most likely would germinate. These ones would have a hard time because they're pushing down, right? And so if you lie it sideways, now each one has a chance to grow. All right. Awesome. We'll get to questions in a little bit, but what I wanted to say about that is that that's just one way to kanu. Like I said, you'll read in Handy's book, Native Planter, that he likes to plant them diagonal. And there's all kinds of different methods to kanu, but that's just one way to do it. And what's good about coal is you can plant it anywhere. Like I said, right on the pahoihoi, right on the you can kanu coal by just throwing some mulch on it and keeping it moist. And it will produce tons of organic matter for you to build soil. And then for those of you that live where there is soil, it will help to break up that compaction. Coal is pretty salt tolerant. It will grow if you have kind of that sandy soil with more pa'akai inside of it. So it's kind of an amazing plant. Our Kūpuna had tons of heirloom coal. A really good book by my friend that was just put out is the coal book. It has all these beautiful varieties of coal, some of their uses, some of them are not all behind, how they got their names. That's just one resource you could turn to. There's some older ones too, but that's the most recent one. So yeah, now we're transitioning to our next video on our next mea kanu. So I really love this plant right here, they're called ʻUala. It's a sweet potato. And there's many, many varieties of this plant, but it's probably the easiest plant to grow here in Hawaii. What I like to do is I like to take cuttings or pula 2 times. The first time I take it is when I'm just trying to bring the vines back in. And what I usually do is I'll usually snap them so that it can store its energy in the root system and you get larger ʻUala a little bit faster. But the second time I'm going to harvest my pula, my slips, are when I actually dig up the ʻUala to eat. I'll save all those cuttings to replant. Another way you could do it at home is you could just sprout the actual sweet potato with a little bit of water in a jar, or just even leave it in a dark place and it'll grow. To make cuttings from this pula, from this stem, is you just grab a piece of the stem, and for this one there's 2 cuttings. You can tell that this is another vine. These are just leaflets. These are the leaves, and you snap them off. And when I like to make cuttings, I like to make it just a ha'ilima long, pointer finger to the elbow. And then when you get to the tip, I like to just snap the tip right off. Ready to grow. This is another cutting. Now there's 2 cuttings here. And when you plant this plant, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to plant it with the L shape, a bend in it. So you'll have this part below the ground, this part above the ground. And what that does is it increases the amount of sweet potatoes, ʻUala, you can get out of this one vine, because all of these nodes will turn into big, giant ʻUala. And this will be the photosynthesizer for the plant. So I'll show you right now. For the ʻUala pula pula, you don't need to go super deep. You can if you want to, but what I've noticed is just, 3 to 4 inches below the surface is plenty. So all you're gonna do is make a little line in the soil, almost like a trench.
I noticed that the ground looks like it's kind of hilled up. Is that something that you recommend doing?
So when you're planting ʻUala, you have to adjust the planting method to where you live. If you live somewhere that's really wet, like Hilo side, even sometimes certain parts of Hamakua, you want to make sure you mound your ʻUala. And the reason why is because ʻUala does not love water. It appreciates getting watered in the first month or so of its life, and then it almost wants none after that. If you keep watering your ʻUala, you're only going to get tons of leaves, which is Mahi ʻai, because you can eat the palula, you can eat the dishes from the leaves. But if you're preferring the sweet potato, you want to plant it in a mound. If you're on a drier side, on Kona side, on a different island that's dry, you don't have to mound it. But here on this side, we like to mound it just in case the heavy rains come. It keeps it elevated and dried out. So you dig your trench. Like I said, you bend it in an L. You want to get multiple nodes, multiple little nodes of these in the ground. That's what develops into your sweet potatoes. Yeah? And then you want to cover it with this tip still pointing up. Now when you harvest, all of your sweet potatoes will be around here, not necessarily at the base of the root, yeah? It will be wherever that L bend was. And that's how you plant ʻUala.
When you say nodes, Kaʻiana, are you talking about where the leaves were before?
Yes, yeah, where the leaves come out, where those little buds are, you're gonna see that they're little bumps, little pu'us in the vine. That's what I mean by a node. And you want to get, at least 4 of those in the ground, but the more the better.
Could you show us with a vine an example of those little buds?
Yeah, so one example of these buds is when I pull these leaves off, you're gonna see it right here, these little bumps. Those little bumps become, do you see those rootlets coming out already? There's little rootlets if you look at them, and that will be what forms your sweet potato. Okay, so something I forgot to mention to everyone is that when we asked about the spiritual side of being a mahi ʻai, I think it's very important that we start getting back into the protocols of mahi ʻai. We talked about planting on the right moon phase. We talked about doing it as an ohana, but I think what we sometimes miss is the protocols before we even enter a hana or enter the mala. For me, what I like to do is, and it can be any protocol that you feel is right for you and your ohana, but I don't like to go into my mala unless I am right. Meaning, I don't want to go in there carrying all the burdens, right? That the world offers, that daily life offers, and the reason why is because our food is a living entity, right? It's energy, and we don't want to add our negative ano into that food. But when we hook it, you're gonna have the mu inside all the bad grubs, and it's gonna have maybe for your poi might sour wrong or whatever it might be. And so to me, I like to just vehe first, right? You come open and you come ready to receive, and you come with a mentality of reciprocity as opposed to that Western mentality of I'm gonna dominate, right? I'm gonna rip up the soil and I'm gonna plant this and throw synthetic fertilizers and spray poisons on the edges. You need to think about how you can best work in cooperation with your aina to produce ono food. I usually vehe by either having a pule or an oli, and that can look like whatever you want it to look like. It can look like an oli that you know already, an oli that you create on the spot, or it can look like a pule that is pre-made and pre-recited, or it can look like a pule of whatever you feel like at that moment. And that kind of vehes that space for you. And then from there, as you're engaging, always talking to the plants, the aina, your kupuna, looking for ho'ailona that things are going right.
My favorite thing is to be in the mall and I see the io on my shirt, seeing the io flying above me. To me, that's my favorite sign. Then I see the nui nui laying over my hale like a lei. Those are just a little ho'ailona that let me know. Those are spiritual signs in the environment that let me know that I'm doing things the right way, and that my kupuna and my akua and everyone is happy, and the aina is happy. And so I just wanted to that's something that came to my mind as we were talking about the ʻUala. So we'll transition into the next mea kanu now.
So this mea kanu Hawaii right here, this Hawaiian plant is called Maiʻa. And when it's growing together in a clump like this, we call it a pū. So this is pū Maiʻa. Certain plants in Hawaii grow in pū, like hala, pū hala, ava, pepperminthisticum, pū ava, and Maiʻa is another one that grows in a pū. So when you're selecting which pohuli, which is what we call a banana keiki, you want to choose, the key is to select one that we call a sword sucker. So if you look right here, this is what we call a sword sucker. There's two of them. Sword suckers have small, thin leaves and they point up towards the sky, and they're real narrow, as opposed to a water sucker, which is right here, that has wide, spread out leaves already as it's young. This is no good. If you replant this guy as a keiki, that's why I killed it. Because if you replant him as a keiki, they're just not as vigorous. They take forever to grow. They get wide and big fast, but they don't ever grow real tall. And so while you can plant it, they're not the preferred pohuli to plant. The sword sucker is the one you want. So this Maiʻa that we're looking at right here is a really special Maiʻa from our Kūpuna that we inherited. This Maiʻa is called Maiʻa hapai. So hapai means pregnant, and Maiʻa is our banana, right? So the pregnant banana, this Maiʻa hapai, is unique, one of the most unique in the world, because it's the only banana species in the world that develops its fruit in the stump. Whereas most bananas will come out of the top and hang out. Our fe'i from Tahiti, they ripen standing up without hanging down. But our Maiʻa hapai, on occasion, not always, but on occasion, it will develop the fruit in the stump. And the way you know that it's developing a fruit in the stump is you begin to see these little cracks in the stump, and it'll look like almost like a wahine who has stretch marks. You'll see all of those stretch marks coming up the stump. And when it starts to get so big that those stretch marks, you can fit your fingers in them because they're so deep, that's when you know it's time to cut the stump open and hang the fruit out of the stump, and let it finish ripening outside the stump. If you keep it in the stump, it will eventually bust through, but you'll lose about half the rack. So I like to kind of, in a way, it's almost like a C-section, right? You're cutting it open and you're bringing the baby out to finish its maturing process outside of the womb. And then what we really love this Maiʻa for is for pupu, for ava. It is mentioned in a lot of the early records as the original pupu for our ava ceremonies. It's a little tiny Maiʻa. They don't get much bigger than this, and it's super ono. When you ripen it, you want to make sure that it has more brown on it than what the typical yellow ripe looks like. In Hawaii, our Maiʻa ripen more farther than what yellow is. Brown a lot of times is ripe to us. So Maiʻa hapai. My favorite tool for digging up pohuli on the Maiʻa is an o'o. And you want to make sure with the o'o that you don't dig too hard into the pohuli you're trying to dig up. So go ahead and work around the perimeter and then give it a clean cut at an angle at the end. When you go to cut the pohuli off, you want to make sure when you separate it from the mama that you come in at an angle towards the mama and not towards the pohuli you want to cut. We want to make sure we dig a little bit into the pū or the corm of this bigger tree.
So you're really trying to protect the pohuli in that final strike, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. This is a beautiful pohuli. No corn weevils, no pests, and this will be a healthy planting material. So for this pohuli, whenever you're sharing material or even replanting it on your own land, it is good protocol to clean it to make sure that there's no banana corn weevils or pests hiding inside this corm, this bottom part, and in the sheaths of the ha. And so one way we do it is we just peel off all the stem that is kind of old from the old leaves that have died, and then we start to trim up the corm to make sure that we can inspect the entire thing, get all the dirt and roots off, to ensure that we're not sharing pests, that we're just sharing pohuli.
So Kaʻiana, you're really removing a lot of that almost outer skin of the base of the pohuli.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. We're removing the outer skin, and you don't have to worry about hurting the pohuli, because the meristem, which is the life force of this, is in the very center where this corm meets this leaf part, the stem base, and so you don't have to worry about hurting it. This is what a clean huli looks like, and what I like to do on a lot of them is I like to just take the top right off, and that's your planting material for your next Maiʻa.
And what would you do next with it?
So once you take this ʻili, the skin off the corm, what you're gonna notice is that this is a fresh wound, right? Wound all the way around. And so what I like to do is dry it in the shade for 2 to 3 days. And once that crusts over with a scab, then I'll pot it up in a pot for a few months. And then from there, I'll transplant it into the land that I want to plant it in. When I put it in the pot, I want to plant it around to there, 3 to 4 inches deeper than where the corm starts. And then same concept when you plant it in the aina. You want to plant it a little bit deeper because Maiʻa grows up and out of the ground. So if you don't plant it deep enough and that makani comes, it'll blow over. And so we want to make sure we get it nice and deep.
So sorry, that one was really long. That's our longest video, I'm pretty sure. And I just thought it was important because so often I see people just digging up pohuli, banana keiki, if you want to call it that, pohuli, and just giving them with dirt and roots and all to their neighbors, yeah. And to me, that's a great way to spread diseases and pests. And so what I wanted to do is just I don't know, for most of you this is basic. The ask for this conference was to keep it basic because we probably were spanning a whole, from people who are just starting to mahi to people that have been mahi ʻai for generations, right? And so I'm just keeping it simple. And but yeah, we'll definitely dive deeper in future workshops on all kinds of things. The biosanitation part is important, especially with the huli. We don't talk about how to clean huli before you give them away very much in this video that's coming up. So for my favorite resource, there's tons of resources, but this is my favorite resource. If you ever have a small fortune hanging around, these things are expensive, but it's really worth it. I call it the Banana Bible. It has every banana in Hawaii that you could ever imagine, not just Hawaiian bananas, but it's great because it has mo'olelo. It has mana'o behind the names. It has the different variants of what the bananas could look like in different environments and locations. Just an amazing work. So yeah, we'll put maybe some of these in the information packet at the end of that so you guys can see some of these resources. And then for the ʻUala, handy Hawaiian planter, not necessarily native planter, a little bit, but his predecessor to that book was Hawaiian planter, and that book has some really ono things about ʻUala too. But yeah, okay, we'll go to the last topic, which is kalo.
Okay, so this is the Kalo plant, and in other places they call it taro or dalo. Hawaii we call it kalo, Colocasia esculenta. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to show you how to quickly process it down one way. There's many ways to process this plant, many ways to cut huli, many ways to prepare for replanting, but I'll show you one way to do it, especially one way that works well here where there's lots of lepo, lots of soil.
in Hamakua. This Kalo plant we're looking at right here is Maiʻa, famous in Puna, grown all over Hawaii Island, but well known in Puna. The most unique trait about this is this lihi right here on the edge of the ha has this broad white stripe. That's how you know it's Maiʻa, with this pointy leaf. Beautiful plant. Ono, when you cook it, has a lot of fragrance, kind of like our ʻUala and our ohe and some of our other Kalo Hawaii. So the easiest way to do this, when they're perfectly ripe, they'll jump right out of the ground for you. And so what we'll do is you just kind of grab the whole makua. This is the makua, this is the oha. Grab the makua and you just huki. And he comes right out. There's the makua. The rest of the oha should come out pretty easy too. If your ground is real pa'a, or if you're growing on somewhere where the soil has lots of rocks, you might want to use a o'o or a shovel. But over here, nice lepo. You can just huki. Shake off the lepo, the dirt. Beautiful. From here, the easiest way to process it, we'll just do the makua for now, is to strip the outer ha off. These are ha, right, the stem. You can save the leaves, the luau. You can save the ha to eat, but you're just going to peel it off by pulling it down towards the iho, or the form. Get all this hulu hulu, all of these roots and extra ili off. For roots, you pull up. For ha, you pull down. Real simple. Yeah? If you're going to replant this at your hale, you don't have to strip that many ha off. But if you're sharing huli, or if you're sharing any kind of plant material, or you want to get rid of some pests, I recommend you take it down to the last ha. Little trick is to cut the middle there and just peel. And what you want to do is you want to take it down to the last ha because you don't want to share pests, right? We want to share huli, but we don't want to share pests. What you want to find is this apex right here on the ha. There's another apex up here, but the ha apex, where the new leaf comes out, that mohala, yeah? That liko sprouts out, and you want to cut with your knife right above that line. You want to make sure that you get a nice clean cut, and that becomes your huli. Now the reason you don't want to cut lower is because you want the lau to be able to come out full and catch the sun right away. The easiest way to cut a huli, you find the kohina, where this ha meets the i'o, and you stick your knife in, and just go halfway is good, and snap. Real easy. And this is your huli, right here.
Kaʻiana, could you show us a ha that had that? You mentioned there was a stripe on the side. Could you find an example? It was kind of hard to see in the video.
No problem. So this is a good one right here. So right here, you can see this white, blotchy, wide stripe on it. And on occasion, there'll even be a little bit of red in that ha on the lihi.
So some of these characteristics are important to help you identify the different varieties.
Identify who it is. And once you know who your kalo is, that name will tell you so much about that kalo. It'll tell you what they like to grow in, where they like to be, who they want to be grown next to. It'll give you traits of how to identify them, who their ohana is, which ohana they belong in, their harvest time, and so forth. And so, knowing the names of these kalo are really, really critical. So the preferred huli, or planting material, which is the top, this piece that we just made right here, this is a huli. And the preferred huli to plant is not from the makua like we made here. It's from the oha. The reason being is because the makua, or this parent plant that we harvested, has given its life already for that big i'o we got, but also for all of the rest of these oha. And like a grandparent, we don't want it to have to keep giving birth and giving life again. And so we put this one to rest. And what we prefer to plant are these large oha. They still have their whole energy and their whole life ahead of them. They're ready for a full cycle. So because this is the preferred one to plant, this is the one that we want to clean and get back in the ground. Again, you want to find where that new ha comes out. Cut it right above there. Halfway in. Many ways to cut huli. Many ways. That's just a really fast way. Some people like to angle it. Some people like to curve it in. But that's just the way we're doing it for today.
what I do want to show you is what we call the Meristem. And what that is, it's a good way to show you how low you can really cut your huli. You could cut the huli, that's the Meristem, that's where the new plant will grow out of. That little triangle, I know it's tough to see.
Hard to see.
And but you can cut your huli real low without killing that Meristem, and that'll still grow. So don't worry too much about cutting your huli too short. As long as you leave, you know, an 1/8 inch to a 1/4 inch, you're perfect. So
Right. So Kaʻiana, we had a hard time seeing what you were trying to show in regards to the Meristem in the middle. Could you show us again with a different color variety so we can see it better?
yeah, here's an easier way to look at it. If you look there, you can see the i'o is right here where we make the poi with, yeah, and the aipa'a. Here's the ha, and here is the center of life for all kalo. That little triangle right there is what creates a whole new kalo plant. So you could cut your huli as low as even right here, and the thing would still grow. So as long as you leave a 1/4 inch, an 1/8 inch, you have plenty of i'o left. Don't worry about cutting it too low.
Meristem, mahalo.
So the aina that we're on has requested that the intent for this huli will be to get big i'o. They have enough of this variety. They don't need to spread it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut the.
Kaʻiana, what is i'o?
Oh, i'o is the corm. Yeah, that hua at the bottom in the ground that we're all going for. What you make poi with. It's what you it's our main staple. And so because the intent is to get a big corm, a big i'o, we want to be able to pluck all of these makas off. We can cut the huli real thin, and then we take these makas and we just pluck them off. Even these small little islets we want to pluck off. That way, this kalo gives its energy mainly into producing the corm or the i'o and not the oha, yeah, or those little offshoots. And so that's one little trick you can do. Because the intent here for this aina is to create big i'o, big corms, we want to use a planting style that's a real ku method, where we're facing this natural curve of the huli towards the rising sun. What that's going to do is it's going to allow that first lull that pukas out to catch the sun immediately, right in the day, and jumpstart that growth process. So we want to face it towards the rising sun, take those makas off, cut the huli real thin, and we're going to plant it nice and deep in a nice lua so that it can grow and fill that hole, that lua, that pit, yeah? We want it to be able to fill it. And so, yeah, that's how we do it. My preferred method of kanu is a o'o bar. And for this method, we're just going to go straight in, wiggle it around, and then place the huli right inside. There are other methods like o kupe style, where you go in at an angle, lift, and slide the huli in. There's a lot of different methods for dryland cultivation. We found at least 7 methods. But today, we're just going to go straight in and move it around and place the huli at the bottom of that hole. Again, we want to face that curve towards the rising sun.
So towards the east.
And pack it in. Make sure you give it a firm pack because we don't want this makani to blow it over. Right now the wind is real strong, and so we want to make sure it has a firm pack around it. And then you could apply whatever mulch you want to on top of it. Luckily, this already has a cover crop sown, which means that there's already beneficial plants in here that will grow with this kalo. And that's the simplest way that we kanu, we plant food.
What sorts of materials would you use to mulch around the base of the huli that you planted?
Some of the best mulches are native plants, are kanu crops, Maiʻa, the leaves from the Maiʻa, the stump from the Maiʻa, but be sure to cut it in quarters so it doesn't host the banana corn weevil. La'i, tea leaf, it does break down kind of fast. You can use anything around you. That concept of use what get. Use guinea grass before it goes to seed. You can use, the ironwood needles as long as you're not wanting to sprout seeds and you're just mulching in the huli. You can use, my favorite grass is the vetiver grass because it lasts a long time. And so whatever you have around you, use it as mulch. So if your huli isn't that nui, if it's not real big, and it looks like this or even smaller, that's no problem. What you can do is you'll cut it the same way. Yeah, you'll take the EO off, and
if you want to preserve the variety, leave these makas on, these eyelets on. And what you want to do is, the general fraction I like to give is 1/3. So if you were to cut this huli into thirds, metaphorically, what I would do is I'd bury it 1/3 in the ground. Yeah, 1/2 is a little bit deep, so 1/3 is good. It's deep enough where it gives the i'o a chance to ripen and develop, but not too shallow that it'll blow over. And so 1/3 is the general rule. And even if you just get a little softball or a little baseball size i'o out of this, that's Mahi ʻai, right? Because that's our kumu used to always say you can only eat 1 spoonful of poi at a time. And so lo'a ka mea ʻai, that was the main thing, is that you had food. And if you have 20 of these, all baseball size, that's plenty food, plenty poi. And so, yeah, I would say about 1/3 is the fraction you're looking for. Mahalo. Again, that's just mana'o from one hale. A lot of Kūpuna do it different ways. And so what I would recommend is you go, whenever I show up to someone's aina, I just watch the way the Kūpuna do them. And I'll just watch for the first few huli, and then I'll do it the same way they're doing it. And to me, please be like that. Please don't say, oh, well, I went learn this way. No, we will do them however the person like them done on their aina. I was just showing you one way you could do it if you've never done it before. Yeah. One of my best resources for kanu kalo, for all things kalo, is this book right here. I mean, there's tons, right? For kalo identification, there's Bulletin 84. There's some really, really good ones in Handy as well, in Hawaiian Planter. But this is a good general one for all kinds of things. But just know that it is a University of Hawaii publication, and so it's not necessarily for growing. There's not a ton of organic information, but it has a lot of good general information in there. And so, yeah. So let's transition a little bit, and if we can, if we can take some questions either out of the chat, or if we hit the questions in the chat off, if you want to go straight into, someone wants to unmute themselves when it's time and ask a question, that'd be awesome. And to me, that's where the honor of this conversation will come.
Kaʻiana, there's a couple of questions in the chat. The first one is from Adele, and she wanted to know, where would you find the book Ko on Oahu? Any recommendations? Or for all the books, maybe?
I don't know.
I can interject. I did reply to Adele, native books, possibly. I've been trying to look online as you've been sharing the books, Kaʻiana. But like you said earlier, UH Press might have Amazon, but trying to support local first. Right?
Yeah, and honestly, all the libraries should have most of these books, so you can just borrow it from the library. Yeah. That's one option as well.
And then there's another question that came in during the ʻUala video from Merrill, and they asked, can you speak about gathering the lau and covering with soil as the gala grows, or do you let the runners just spread?
Sorry, my computer turns ʻUala into gala apparently. So I learned different ways, and just wondered what you've tried.
Okay, yeah, easy. So the way I like to gather the lau on the gala, I'm just kidding, on the ʻUala, the way I like to gather it is I like to use the young tender shoots. So you can eat the older leaves too, that's no problem. It's like a thicker spinach, as you cook it down. And to make palula, you can just steam it. You can steam it. Sometimes I like to steam it and then add some coconut milk to it, and a little bit of pa'akai, a little bit of salt. But it's pretty much like when lu'au, like when spinach, green, high nutrient. It's nutrient dense, and so yeah. And then when I'm you can do the method you talked about so typically when I grow it, I like to grab the vines and bring them up, and sometimes they break, no problem. I just fold them in on themselves because I want to stun the ʻUala to store its energy in the root system and stop growing all the leaves, right? But if you want to grow the leaves, that's fine. You can just keep mounding soil on top of it. You'll get ʻUala here and there, but you won't get like the good sized ones, yeah. And you'll have to dig kind of a wider perimeter.
But yeah, whatever feels right to you is my kind.
And am I looking for the flowers to be at a certain stage to tell me when to start like feeling around and seeing what the corm might be doing? Sometimes I'm not sure when to start digging under the leaves into the pu'one to test like if the tubers are ready.
Yeah, there's many reasons ʻUala would flower, just like kalo, many reasons it would flower. But ʻUala, some varieties just tend like Okinawan, the Okinawan variety that everyone grows, that one just flowers all the time. Some of our Hawaii ʻUala don't flower nearly as much. So flowering is not an accurate way to know if your ʻUala is hua at the bottom. What is honestly, you have to just see where you're growing it, because if you're at a higher elevation, it takes a long time for it to get the ʻUala formed. If you're by the kai, it seems to happen a little faster. So I would just, if it was me, I would just go 4 months, dig one little thing out and see how much is there. If there's nothing, wait till 6 months, right? And just kind of keep trying, and then memorize that variety ripens at that time period on your aina during this season. So really, about being a mahi ʻai, it's all about being a master of kilo, of observation, and doing that research yourself. Yeah. People want a standard answer, like, when's the best time to harvest my kalo? Like, bro, it all depends, right? It depends on who you're growing. It depends on where you're growing. It depends on the season. I mean, so I would say just kilo, just observe and see when it's ready.
Kaʻiana, there's another question in here from Erin, and she asked, do you know what variety of sugarcane was grown on Maui by the sugar plantation?
Yeah, so there was a few varieties grown by the sugar plantation. From what I understand, they were both hybrids. So they had some genes from our Hawaii coal cross-pollinated with like the yellow Caledonia sugarcane and a few others, just because it created a hardier cane, more resistant to like the sugarcane borer and some of the mealybug and even rats that like to chew on the stems. So I believe it was a cross. I don't think it was an heirloom.
One more question from Vicky. What variety of dryland kalo do you recommend for planting in Kokoiki?
So that's a great question. Dryland kalo. Let's start there, because it's kind of a myth, and the reason why I say that is because while there are certain kalo like apuai, that was kind of the picture of this conference, and apu that love fresh cold water, you can grow it dryland too beautifully. Matter of fact, the pictures from this conference were all grown dryland. And so to me, the dryland wetland kalo thing is kind of a myth, because I've taken kalo out of the lo'i, out of Waipio, brought it right up to our aina in the mala, dry mala, and it thrives. Right? First generation, it might transition, just might get used to it. And second generation, they're gonna bang, and then vice versa, right? A lot of the Waipio kalo farmer guys the lo'i farmers come up to get huli that don't have apple snail. In mala, there's no apple snail, and so and then first to second generation, it's banging in the lo'i down there. So that's kind of a myth, and I know it came from like the earlier newspaper articles where they were designating between how it was grown. And some kupuna swear they can taste the difference between lo'i grown poi and mala grown poi, and it actually is true. But the kalo doesn't mind. To me, the kalo doesn't care. As long as you give it the right food, it will be happy. As far as the place, I'm actually not aware of what aina that is. So maybe if you could be more specific of where that is. No. North Kohala? Okay. So Kohala has very famous kalo, actually. They're famous for Pikokea, thrives up there. Ololu, which is not the traditional name for that variety, but that's where it was found. And so it was named after Ololu Valley. The Japanese up there call it bakatare, which means stupid. Because you'd have to be stupid to ku'i that kalo if it was cold. One time we did a ku'i kalo with all these kids, and we brought pololu, and I told my friend, hey, make it hot, steam them before you come. And he never. And when the kids was ku'i them, was like ballistic missiles up there, bro. They were just, they're just firing, hitting people in the head. Like, so, yeah, pololu, apu was famous up in Kohala as well. And, yeah.
Hope that answers your question. Any other question?
There's a bunch of questions that just came up, but I did want to call on Kumu Jane that's on here because she's
Okay.
raising her hand.
Oh, mahalo. You know what? I Googled it. It was hard to hear when you were talking about Wahiapele. So I wanted to make sure I heard it correctly. So, but I Googled and I found I was going to ask you to put it in the chat so we could see the name just to make sure I was writing it down. But I got him. Thank you.
Yeah. Uahiapele, Wahiapele. Now there's a coal that's Wahiapele, and again, don't get it confused with Honua ʻUala. A lot of the ones you see around Hilo and around a lot of the islands is Honua ʻUala. It's the one that's all purple, right? So Wahiapele is ʻUala. It's also a kalo, and so yeah, it's cool that a lot of these things got the same names.
The next question is, what do you recommend to use for pest control? And then there's a second question that kind of follows it. How can you tell if your Maiʻa have weevils? What will it look like?
Oh, good question. We were just talking about this. So we'll start with the Maiʻa one and then we'll do pest control in general. You'll know if your Maiʻa has corn weevils because when you take a Huli out, you're going to see these little holes in there, little like termites, termite holes. And they create this Swiss cheese kind of environment in your pool, in the corn. And one of the easiest ways to know if you have corn weevils before you dig it out is, some people think that they naturally just need to, no matter what, prop up their Maiʻa with, wood, with la'au, with these braces. But it is not normal for a healthy banana to fall over because of its fruit. The natural state of that tree, especially fall over when it's fruiting and it's just green, right? The natural state of that tree is supposed to be able to hold the weight of that fruit. So if you're propping it up with a piece of wood, there's a good chance you have corn weevils. If it's blowing over and it's not even a heavy storm, there's a good chance you have corn weevils. If it was super saturated from a heavy rain and then the makani comes, now that doesn't necessarily mean you have it. But, I would say that most people probably have the corn weevil because they travel very efficiently. So that's that. Now, with regards to like pest control, it varies for every plant I talked about. And let's just talk about Kalo for one. Yeah, the Kalo is one that we can control it relatively easy. The main pests for Kalo are like leaf hoppers, which are delphacids. They're these little jumping bug, and aphids. So with aphids, you control the ants. To control the ants, you control the aphids. Another easy way is you intercrop Kalo with ladybug, pollinator species, right? Species that attract ladybugs, praying mantis that attack the aphids. There's also the biosecurity, just transferring of Huli is important, right? So you can strip it down to the last ha like I showed in the video. You can give it a hot water bath. It says in this book how long to cook your Huli. It's really just a hot water dip. But to me, that wastes gas. It's not efficient. Another way to do it is to do a 10% bleach dip. So 1 part bleach to 10 parts water. Dip the Huli in it. Make sure it goes in the sleeves of the sheath. That's where they hide. The other way to do it is do a kai soak. So you take it to the kai. I'll take all of my Huli. I'll bundle it in a pu'olo. And then I'll take my tronet with the heavier weights. Yeah. And I'll take my tronet and throw it on top and sink it to the bottom of the kai. I'll let my kids out kai for an hour or two. Bring my Huli back in my net. Go home. All my Huli is sterile. Yeah. So there's multiple ways to clean your Huli. There's also a really cool way to clean it if it's already in the field. Say you planted your Huli. Oh, I see leaf hoppers. What you do is you wait till the third leaf emerges. And this is critical. The third leaf is critical. Wait till the third leaf emerges. And then you stack all of your dried lau, your lau malo'o, your dried ulu leaf, your dried banana leaf, your dried sugarcane leaf, all dried leaves. Stack it high. Hapu'u fern, uluhe, as high as that kalo is, and you light the whole kalo patch on fire safely if you can do it, right? Don't do it if it's a dry season or if you're prone to forest fires, and burn the whole kalo patch to the ground. And what will happen, and it takes a little bit of faith, but we've done it many times. What will happen is you'll notice that in that field of ash, in the next 2 days, these little green, they look like, slugs almost start creeping out. And then they just grow vigorous. Like I promise you, if you planted your huli right and you burn it at third leaf, they come back so vigorous from all the ash, pest free. I mean, it's the best method. It's not mine. I learned it from Kūpuna, and it's the most efficient method for getting rid of pests.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. There's a question here from Byron, and he asks, can you grow the coal upright instead of lying it down?
You can, but what I've noticed is if you do that, you maybe only get one maka to germinate, and the water sits on top of the coal that's standing straight up. It sits on this portion, or this portion at the top. The water will sit there and rot the sugarcane all the way down. So when you lie it flat, this hard shell is a nice protector from when you water. Yeah, it'll rot a little bit on the end and a little bit on the end. But if you're standing it straight up, say you plant your coal like this, yeah, this part right here rots really fast, and then that rot just works its way down into your whole plant. And so I would say yes, you can, but it's much more efficient and worth your time to plant it like this. Now, if you want to pot it up, then you can just do it, 2 nodes, no problem. You have 2 muckas, you can still lie it flat. But yeah, I think like this is just not. I wouldn't do it, but feel free. I mean, you can try for sure. Yeah.
So Hi'iaka Jardine says aloha, and she's spearheading an Aina restoration project in Ahui Manu, where there's the largest intact terrace lo'i system on Oahu, and she would love to work with you. I did drop in the kohalacenter.org in there if you want to check that out. But I don't know if you wanted to address that, Kaʻiana.
Yeah, Luana, you can send her privately send her my email, and we can talk. We hold a really large collection of 183 kalo varieties. We hold the coal collection of a Kūpuna coal. We hold the Hawaiian Maiʻa collection of our heirloom Maiʻa and our heirloom ʻAwa. So I'd love to. I'm always looking for people to act as backups for holding these collections. So yeah, let's definitely talk story.
Awesome. Okay, and then Jessica Leonard just wrote in here, if it's ciliads, I have a lot of ohia.
I think that was a follow-up to the pest question. I was trying to be more specific.
Mahalo. Just got to make sure I'm covering everybody's things.
Yeah, and actually, real quick.
And then most of it.
Don't put wood in to burn your mala down. It needs to be a flash burn. So something that burns real hot, real fast. We don't want a long sustained burn like you're building a campfire, right? So no wood. It can be like branchy, like the hapu stem and the uluhe, but that stuff still flash burns pretty quick. But yeah, you don't want to create a long-term fire on it. You don't want the heat to go into the ground too much. You want to just burn everything above. So yeah.
Joy asked, once your Maiʻa tree bears fruit, does that same stump bear fruit again or not?
No. And what I see as a general practice is people cutting the whole stump down. I have found it much more beneficial to just cut the fruit off and cut the leaves off and leave the entire stump standing. What tends to happen is that whole stump, especially when you're in a dry area, that stump that you just cut the fruit off will give all of its water back to the keiki that it's attached to, and they will just boost. When you take all of that moisture away, they have a harder time with that transition. So I would cut the rack off, cut the leaves off, and leave the whole stump standing, and it will feed all its water back into everything attached to it.
Moai has a question. Does harvesting palula or luau upset corn harvest?
So these are great questions. Yeah, so for kalo, you can harvest luau up to 3 times in a lifespan without stunting the corn too bad. Meaning like once at 3 months, once at 6 months, and then once when you harvest your kalo. Yeah. So, and that won't stunt your kalo. Now, when you're harvesting luau, please do not harvest all of the lau at one time. Yeah. That's like taking off all the solar panels off your roof at once. Yeah. You want to still have 1 or 2 on to charge your phone, right? To do what you got to do. The kalo is the same way. Leave a few solar panels on. What we like to do is take the number 1 leaf. Yeah. This leaf right here in the middle. Hey, bro, this is the best leaf. You're never going to find it in stores because it bruises easy. But this is the softest luau. It breaks down fast in the pot, comes creamy. So this one is the one, number one, and then number two. And if you really got to number three, meaning the third youngest leaf, and leave some of these older leaves still on to still photosynthesize for the plant and act as their solar panels. And you can do that up to 3 times. Palula doesn't matter because ʻUala, even if you heavy prune it, it's just going to store its energy more and more in the bottom, which is what you want. So I wouldn't worry too much about the palula. But for the luau, yeah, 3 times is kind of max. Doing it more than that, you will start to affect the form size.
Mahalo, Kaʻiana. But there's another question that just came up from Ethan. Is there a strong way to permanently and or temporarily remove beetles? I was wondering about a way to stop pests and other small critters and insects.
Yeah, every critter and insect has a different way to treat them. What I've noticed is that they love these plants just as much as we do. And so really it's all about finding other things they love more than the plants that we want to grow for our food. And that, there's ways to deter them. Some insects go off smell, right? That's they're attracted to things that smell. Some go off things that they can see. They're visual bugs. So it's all about identifying the pest that you have specifically and then coming up with a creative solution for that. And there are plenty. But it's tough to give a general answer for that if that makes sense.
Mahalo, Kaʻiana. That's all for what's in the chat.
Okay, perfect. What time is it? Oh,
we have about 9 minutes.
Okay.
2 more minutes. I had a question for you though, Kaʻiana. Let me first just answer. All the recordings from today will be available. If you've registered for the summit, we will be sending out the links. There are a few presenters that did opt to not have the session recorded, so all others should be available through that link later today. But after watching some of the videos, Kaʻiana, just wondering, and because I'm an ʻōlelo person, right? You referenced a lot of different ʻōlelo in some of your practices, and even you mentioned, right, being right and not carrying a burden when you're going into the mala. I just wanted to know if you could elaborate a little bit more on the importance of words or ʻōlelo in your practice as a mahi ʻai.
Yeah, mahalo for that. So understanding ʻōlelo Hawaii has changed my view, my worldview of how I see things as a mahi ʻai. So, certain words had different connotations attached to them that really expand my understanding. And so, yeah, words are critical because they manifest, what's to come. And so, to me, preparing to go into a mala is, sometimes I just want to rush in, but I always make sure I stop and I make sure I'm right because this hana is too important. Especially when I'm giving this as la'au, as medicine, right? This food is medicine to people. I got to make sure that I'm putting from the very beginning to the consumption, that whole line, that whole process is done with pure intentions, with proper protocols, so that as we consume it, it is the literal best food we could eat. These protocols, actually, I learned a lot of them from Uncle Jerry, and I want to honor and respect Nikki. She's on this call. Nikki Konanui, that's his daughter, and and then Hayden. Their line of knowledge was unbroken for multiple generations, and so a lot of this knowledge I hold is their ohana knowledge. And I just want to make sure I honor that. But yeah, he was the one that told me that you have to be vehe. He would always remind me to make sure that we can receive what we need to receive from the pole, from the other side, from our Kūpuna. And he would always remind me that if you didn't have the answer, if you didn't know who that kalo was, just spend time with them and it will be revealed to you. He would always say, it's in your koko. It's in your koko. And sure enough, that happens all the time when you're in that realm. And something he would always say too is that when you're in that specific, when you did all your protocols right and you're in the mala, you're doing the right thing because even the mosquitoes leave you alone. And it's true. When you get into that hana and you're in that zone. I don't know what you call it, but you're just so in tune with everything around you. The mosquitoes don't even bother you, and you don't even recognize them, right? But everyone else is like, doing the slap dance, but you're over here just, in that zone, and so it's a beautiful place to be.
So, we are getting to the end, but just because I get too much, hopefully quick questions for you. The first, where I know you talked about, right, not sharing mea kanu, especially, or being maka'ala, right, watching out as you're sharing mea kanu, just because of the pests. Where might you recommend that people can get mea kanu from if they don't have access to friends or mahi ʻai friends? And then, what's your favorite mea kanu?
Awesome. So there's lots of places. Every island has places that you can get these plants from. So, Kauai has a botanical garden. They have tons of kalo farmers that you can just go and give some time. And when you go and you put your huli kalima ilalo, when you put your hands in the aina, for some reason, when you're working with kanaka, you walk home with your hands full. I know nobody's left my farm without their hands full. That's just a thing we do, right? So that's one way to get them. Spend some time, receive that knowledge, and usually those things will walk home with you. Oahu has some amazing places. Waimea Botanical Garden holds a lot of these collections. I know Waimanalo has a sitar station that has a lot of the color varieties, and there's all kinds of just a simple Google of botanical gardens would give that to you. Same with on this Mokupuni. On Maui, there's Maui Nui Botanical Gardens. In Hana, there's Mahele Farms, and all kinds of wonderful places. Over here, we have Amy Greenwell's, we have our farm, we have some places in Hilo. So I would really just look around. It's not that hard to find. And then, Kalama, your other question was about favorite.
Do you have a favorite mea kanu?
Oh, so my answer is the same as Uncle Jerry's. My favorite is the one. He said, my favorite kalo variety is the one in my bowl on my table. And that's my say mana'o with these plants. It's the one that's in front of me that is ready to eat is my favorite.
Mahalo. That brings us to the end of our session today. We just really want to mahalo you, Kaʻiana. As I've been listening, I think I've learned that you are a very patient person, right? To be able to kilo and watch your mala and just learn about the mea kanu through the practice of mahi ʻai. You gotta have patience to do that day in and day out. Also learned that you're very humble. So much ike that you've shared with us. And we so appreciate it. So mahalo nui a oi. To our audience, mahalo for joining us today. We hope that you leave a little more inspired and enriched by Kaʻiana's words. In the chat, you will find the link to our lunchtime mele, which is coming up next. And the second session for the day will be starting at 12:45. Mahalo nui again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the summit. Aloha.
If you'd like to watch any of the videos that Kaʻiana prepared on planting the different mea kanu he shared today, please visit our tiny URL link or use the QR code provided. Mahalo.